From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
The push to move when you vote. Proposed legislation would move primary day earlier to get Rhode Island in compliance with federal law. But when? And how will it affect voter turnout? Our guest this week on Newsmakers, Rhode Island Secretary of State, Nellie Gorbea. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on the program, Eyewitness News reporter Ted Nesi. Secretary Gorbea, it's good to have you on the program. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
This is great. Let's start where we start at the top of the show. Primary day, one of your bills would move it earlier. Right now, as everyone knows, primaries in September, just 6 weeks between primary day and the general election. It looks like the General Assembly has settled on moving it to the day after Labor Day. Are you okay with that?
I'm okay with that. That was part of the compromise. There was a lot more skittishness about moving it into August because it's not just about that one day, it's the entire calendar. So when are nominations, when do people get their signatures done, all of that would have to move a little bit. And so it puts it into the session. There was a lot of concern about is the focus going to be there? It's like a lot to put on the last days of the session. So they said, is there any other way that we can do this? My staff worked through a number of calendars going forward, and basically we're doing what Massachusetts.
We're all going back to school. Parents are very busy at that time. Are you worried that that's a lot to throw, at people to get out to the polls? And
I don't think so. I mean, this is the primary to begin with, so it's not the general election. The general election gets a lot more people out. This is the primary. I think that primary voters tend to be very self-motivated, and my whole job is to make sure that our men and women in uniform, which is why we're proposing this, are able to get their ballots to and from us. Or from us and back to us in time to get their votes counted. And so that was really the crux of moving the date.
Explain that. You have 45 days?
We have 45 days. Federal law requires that all men and women in uniform and overseas voters are able to get their ballots at least 45 days before the general election. And because our date was so far into September, the current date that we have right now in the law, we needed to change it. And so I don't want to do it just for next year, which is really where the problem was, but rather to do something a little bit more structural to make sure that this doesn't happen going into the future. And so by moving it just one more week up, which is 8 weeks before the general, we can solve this.
Secretary, I do remember, to Tim's point, you said to us a few years ago after you'd gone through your very hard-fought primary from 2014, you thought having the primary in this time of year at all was a problem. You said it's hard for you. You said as a working mother, you said with your kids going back to school and everything, it was really hard to be campaigning through August into early September. But you say you're okay with this. Did you make a pitch for a significantly earlier one, or was that just a dead letter in the Assembly?
No. So my original legislation was, as after, you air concerns and then you hear back from people, and legislation is the art of compromise, right? And so you hear from a number of people. I have that concern as a working mom. People had other concerns about the August dates, and we came up with September 8th, which I think is a reasonable compromise.
Do you see yourself next year having another piece of legislation to move it back into August and sort of inch it back further? Or
no, I think at this point, you'd have to go through a few cycles so that people get a sense of what it feels like. Changing elections really, from one cycle to the other, I think is very disorienting to people. So I think at this point, this is our best proposal at this point in space and time. We're going to go with it, and I think it's going to be fine.
The political analyst Ron Brownstein had an interesting article earlier this week saying that forecasters, Republican and Democratic forecasters, think there could be a tsunami, their words, of voter turnout next year, because passions are so high right now on all sides. You've been pushing for a while to add in-person early voting, where you have a formal system to go to City Hall, cast your ballot early, etc. There's always different debates about how many days or whatnot. Right now, that's bottled up in committee. I've heard in previous years skepticism, concerns in the legislature. Are you concerned that if they don't act on early voting this year in the legislature, it's going to be harder to deal with that high turnout next year?
I have expressed my concern directly to both the Senate President and the Speaker of the House that if this bill does not happen, we are very much opening the doors to somewhere in the next cycle there being massive problems.
What did they say to you?
Well, they say that they're looking at it and that they have concerns from different members. I said, you know what? The clerks want this because they don't want to have lines out the door or have a problem. The process that we have right now, which is called emergency mail ballots, is very paper intensive. what I'm proposing is you just do a regular polling location and you offer voters Saturday and Sunday before that election, so that for 4 hours on a Saturday, 4 hours on a Sunday, if you can't make it during your regular work week, you can go in and vote. And that deals with the demand. So I am very concerned, and I have expressed those concerns to the leadership. I'm hoping that they will still take action in the last few days of the session, because I am very concerned about the possibility of there being a breakdown in the system come 2020.
Let's talk more about that, because I mean, I'm sure there'll be some people home listening and say, well, you know, Secretary, yeah, nobody likes waiting in line, but is that really a huge crisis to stand in a line on election day?
It's not just about the crisis or the length of waiting in the line. And by the way, I don't think that you should wait more than 20 minutes, which is really what the national standard is. It's also about the fact that you are not actually casting your ballot into the machine. When you cast your ballot into the machine, if you have a mistake on the ballot, it spits it out, and you can correct that mistake. Or you can say, you know what, I don't have time, I'm just going to let it go. You make that decision. When you go through an emergency mail ballot process, because the board has to actually verify that this is a real voter and checks the signature, there's a very involved process. Once that person is approved as a real voter, then the ballot goes into a pile, because they don't want to see how people vote. If that ballot gets spit out by the machine, you may not vote.
Or as we reported, it gets remade at the Board of Elections on Election Day, and we saw a spike of remade ballots.
Which is not where you want it. You want the voter to have control over that ballot, not somebody else.
All right, so what is the headwind you're facing? The Speaker and the Senate President said, we'll think about it or whatever, and they have concerns from their membership. What are those concerns?
I would ask the Speaker directly that, or the Senate President.
Well, you have to address those concerns, so you're not hearing what they are. So
So I keep talking to people who want this. They want the voters.
You should
want
probably
this,
talk to other
the clerks.
people.
No, I know. So I'm trying to figure out where is this opposition, because I'm not seeing it in that chamber. As you know, the State House can be sort of interesting that way.
Yes.
The one thing that I can come up with is this fear of change, that there might be a change that might upset certain races or my own race or things like that. I don't think those are valid concerns when we're talking about elections functioning properly.
Well, isn't one of the concerns that a lot could happen in the 2 weeks, if it's 2 weeks, leading up to an election? That could change your mind?
Yeah, well, how many people voted, and then have, after the election, had second thoughts? That's a singular moment in individual voters. I'm talking about the integrity of elections, making sure that elections happen as smoothly and as in control of that voter, having control over their ballot as much as possible. It's the same reason why I put stamps on mail ballots, so that the voter has the power to send that ballot back in the mail, not have to give it to anybody else or have to come into city or town hall.
All right, let's stick with
one other question on, one other question on 2020. There's been so much talk about election security, technology, hacking, cybersecurity, all that whole stew of issues, and it's so complex. But just to put a fine point on it, is there any sign that there's been any effort to hack into our voting databases and systems in Rhode Island?
So there's a wide range of descriptions of what people are. There's penetration, there's hacking, there's tinkering, there's all sorts of things. What I can tell Rhode Island voters, and you all very straightforwardly, is there has been no successful penetration of our systems. There is every day in Rhode Island, in Massachusetts, everywhere, there are attempts to try to get into our systems. And we have to be constantly vigilant, and we have been under my watch, to make sure that those attempts are not successful. And it goes beyond the hardware and the software. It goes to training my own staff on how to recognize phishing emails. We have an ongoing anti-phishing email training program going on, where we review with employees, like, hey, you clicked on this, you can't be clicking on stuff, this is why. So, because it doesn't matter, it's not just the elections system that gets sort of that people will try to penetrate. It will be through, most likely, something like a phishing email, as we saw.
Is that how you know there are attempts? Is it primarily through phishing emails, or have you seen other attempts?
We get a lot of information from the Department of Homeland Security, which we have a partnership with in terms of what are other states experiencing, and so there is a real collaborative effort to share knowledge on what people are trying to do, and there's alerts that happen on a almost weekly basis, telling us, like, okay, these are things that we're seeing in places, so that we can all take precautions.
All right, let's tackle this one. You have a bill that would withhold birth dates of registered voters from lists that your office has traditionally provided when requested. You have argued this is to help protect voters from having their identity stolen. But do you admit that it will be at the cost of making it harder for journalists to continue to do their job of, looking for dead people on voter rolls or looking for people who are registered in more than one state? In other words, be a watchdog.
I have made elections integrity and accessibility cornerstones of my administration. From the beginning, whether it be purchasing new voting systems, securing our software and our hardware, everything that I've done has improved the accountability, the integrity of election systems. So I do take exception with that characterization of what we're doing. What we are doing with this
that wasn't my question. My question was, do you admit that if this law passes, it'll make it harder for us?
No.
To
I don't.
How is that?
Because, so you gave one example, so people who might be deceased. Well, we are giving out the year of birth. So you can look at people's year of birth and then their names, and you can still do a lot of analysis with the information we're providing. But the information that we're keeping out is also, so one of the really challenging things as Secretary of State is to balance, yes, we want the office to be held accountable, absolutely. I've done everything I can to make sure that we have open and transparent government in Rhode Island. But at the same time, technology is such that that full date of birth is really valuable to identity thieves, to marketing companies, to all sorts of people, but particularly identity thieves. And people are very concerned. This is one of those things where everywhere I go, Rhode Islanders are thanking me for protecting their privacy and their identity.
All right, but Rhode Islanders also have an interest in making sure that the fourth estate journalism is able to do their job. And I should make an important disclosure. I'm a board member of the New England First Amendment Coalition, which met with you this month, I think, on this issue. I was not part of that meeting. Look, assuming all your intentions are good, what happens when a different Secretary of State takes the office, like we saw in Texas with David Whitley in Texas, and they attempt to purge the voter rolls? And reporters, years down the road, we can't check that out because of the law that you put in the books was passed. Does that concern you?
No, so what concerns me is that you're seeing it that way, because it doesn't do that at all. You can, first of all, the Texas Secretary of State, of course, was caught, right? So we are talking about something. But more than anything, I want to make sure that I leave government in an even better place. Regardless, I want myself to be held accountable. I want the next secretary to be held accountable. You can hold accountable the Secretary of State and the voter list maintenance process with year of birth. You don't need that month and the day. So that is still, and by the way, I have made it accessible. The full date of birth is accessible to be looked at in my office on a terminal, so you can actually sort and do all sorts of research there. What you can't do is just walk away with 780,000 dates of birth.
And I haven't done that type of data dive, but I've talked to reporters who have and said that going to the terminal would make it very difficult for the 1,000, 2,000 names, and it might be an inaccurate
But listen to that, 1,000 to 2,000 names out of 700. No, but actually, we did run the numbers. We checked out, if you just do year of birth and the first name, the last name, the middle initial, all of the information, the number of questions that you have, two John Smiths in 1943, for example, that you get are about 2,300 out of 780,000 people who's now you're not putting at risk of identity theft. And so you have to, in these positions, balance out, make sure that you, yes, absolutely, I believe in the press providing sort of that counterpunch to be able to look at the information, to hold the elected officials accountable. But we also have to recognize that we're in a different technological age.
We're overdue for a break, but I just have to ask, apart from the substance of this, which I think you guys just litigated, this has become, it seems like a bit of a political black eye for your office. After a pretty successful first term, you're overwhelmingly reelected. Sued by the Projo over this, a lot of chatter about it. The bill was put back into committee. Do you wish you'd handled it differently in retrospect?
Not at all. I believe that I am holding true to what I told Rhode Islanders, is that I would make government work for them. Part of making government work for them is to make sure that the media has access to the voter lists and the information they need to make this office accountable. You can do that with date of birth. And actually, I am thanked everywhere I go. And I have the support of the ACLU, I have the support of Common Cause, I have the support of Phil West, for that matter, on these matters, because people understand that the world is different and government needs to adapt and protect Rhode Islanders at the same time as we need to make sure that you can, in the media, hold government accountable.
All right, we're going to take a break on the program. Our guest, obviously, is Rhode Island Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea. When we come back, we'll touch on politics 2020 and 2022. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White, or welcome back. To my left is Ted Nesi, and our guest this week is Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea. Secretary, without making an endorsement, I'm just wondering if there's anyone you're interested in or watching closely in a run for president in 2020.
So I'm still getting through the couple dozen people who are running for president of the Democratic Party. So no, not yet. I mean, and also, I want to do the research myself. I don't want to just look at it through the filter the filter that the media has of like, oh, this is the most cool Democrat right now in the race, because that changes from week to week.
Do you know any of them, or have you ever met any of them?
Yeah, sure, of course. You can't be in Democratic politics and not meet some of them. So, yeah, no, absolutely.
Well, let me ask you about a different election then, since you didn't filibuster us on that, which is great. Let's talk about 2022.
Oh, wait, I have other things to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. Something else. Look, brass tacks. We all, we always are looking ahead. Governor Raimondo is term limited, and your name is at the top of all the short lists of people who could run for governor, seek the Democratic nomination next time. Is that something you'll be considering?
I am working very hard to really finish this term. I think what people really want is not elected officials who are looking at what's next, but rather what's in front of them right now. And so I am thrilled and I am very humbled by the fact that there are people talking about me in the potential for that run, but right now it's too early.
Are you ruling it out?
I'm not ruling anything out. There's all sorts of things that I'm not ruling out. But I have to say, it's been a real joy to be able to deliver to Rhode Islanders a government that works for them and to show that we can do things well in Rhode Island. We're a national leader on elections and cybersecurity. That's fantastic. Just this week, we were given a shout out by the Election Assistance Commission in one of their slides.
Would you run for this office again if there wasn't a term limit?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I think that term limits are good in that they bring a different set of eyes into things. If you're going to talk about sort of, holding people accountable, certainly having a changeover helps with that transparency and looking at things that other people would do differently. So not necessarily.
So you're not going to put in a bill to end term limits for these secretaries?
Just one final question on it. We won't waste too much time. But when do you think, if you were to contemplate that, you'd have to actually think hard about it and actually make decisions to be able to run that race the way you'd want to?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard. I mean, I really. So much of my time is focused on making sure that 2020 runs well. We just announced, for example, that we will be rebuilding the central voter registration system. That's going to take a lot of time and effort from my office, for example. We've hired, after an RFP process with 4 bids, a Pawtucket-based company, Stonewall Solutions, and we're excited. The boards of canvassers who are part of this process, along with the Board of Elections, everybody's very excited to make this happen, but it's a lot to have happen before 2020.
Well, let me ask you about last year's election briefly. Then you made it. Your former, I don't know, mentor might be the wrong word, but who hired you, former Secretary of State Matt Brown, who ran in the Democratic primary for governor and who you worked for years ago. He primaried Governor Raimondo, and you chose to remain neutral, while the other statewide office holders endorsed the incumbent Democratic governor. I would say there was some displeasure among the governor's allies, aides, and advisors about that decision. Why did you make that decision, and have there been lingering hard feelings over that?
No, I mean, in politics, I don't think if you're really good at this stuff, you don't have lingering hard feelings for the most part. I will say that I learned my lesson from the Bernie Sanders-Hillary Clinton primary. I took a stand there very early on for Hillary, which I supported, and that gave pause. I think that the role of Secretary of State, because it has some oversight over a piece of the elections puzzle, does give people pause. And for people who don't understand that I'm not running the election, if they see me endorsing people as Secretary of State, then they might think that, well, somehow that the system is rigged.
Then why did you walk the district for Speaker Mattiello just before his very hard-fought election?
So that was very different. He was just walking in the district, and he asked me, could I come and meet some people? And that's a very different thing than having an endorsement process.
You didn't endorse him at the time?
No, I was simply walking with him and talking with voters, listening to what they were saying
come
about
on,
the
voters
office.
are going to. Did you walk with Steve Frias too?
Nobody didn't ask me either. So, and actually, I think that within reason, I think people expect certain things. I don't think that many Republicans would expect to, ask me to walk with them. But no, I don't think that was a problem. I think in the end, it strengthened the integrity of that primary process and that election, and I think it was a positive.
Have you brought that up to him now that your bills seem to be stalling out at the General Assembly?
When a lot of people are abandoning him?
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, it's, the bills that I have going forward, I think, are important bills. I'm hoping that both the Speaker and the Senate President, who has a very important role to play as well, will support the measures that I put forward going.
Something I've done some reporting on. You've made protecting the state's archives a priority, and you have a snazzy proposed building that would be across the street from the State House. Last time I interviewed you on this, you estimated the cost, I think you called it back of envelope cost, is $52 million. Any indication there will be any money? We're taping this on a Friday. Sounds like the state budget's going to be tackled tonight, that there's going to be any money in the state budget for the archives?
Yeah, I don't think so. We're right now in the process of, the governor has asked us also to look at the Department of Transportation building and whether that would be a suitable space. So we are going to be doing that over the next few months.
The whole building?
No, a piece of it. So,
so Rideout would still be in there, and
No. Rideout would move out, and then there would be some other reuse.
But I know
of
you
that.
don't love that.
So, no, I mean, I think a new building is going to be more cost effective. But you know what? I'm a person who actually believes in listening to others, even when they differ with you on opinions, and say, okay, let's go ahead and try this out and examine what that might cost and what it might look like. I'm not going to just say no because I don't, like it.
So what happens? In the meantime, you don't have a permanent place for the archives.
No, in the meantime, yes, we have one more year on this option that we have for a leased office space. I mean, we can't just move it over to another permanent facility, I don't think, in the sense that we don't want to be moving those precious documents repeatedly. So I believe that we're on a path to find a permanent solution. And that's a really important path to be on for documents that date back to the founding of our country and the founding of our state.
Still a lot of concern about the coming 2020 U.S. Census. Matters hugely for Rhode Island, not only because we could lose a congressional district in the state, but also federal funding and getting an accurate count of who actually lives here, et cetera. There's fights at the federal level with the Trump administration over the citizens question, et cetera. Where's your head at? Are you concerned right now about the Senate, the census? Where's your head at about that right now?
No, absolutely. I think everybody in Rhode Island should be concerned about the census. We have to make sure that we get every person living in Rhode Island counted in the census. The census was not meant to be an exercise to determine who are the citizens or who, are X number of people. It was meant to be everybody counted. Going back to the Constitution, it was everybody get counted. So we need to make sure that happens. I have been in a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations. Everywhere I go in the community, I talk about the importance of getting counted in the census.
You are probably the most prominent Latina public official in Rhode Island, and you have deep ties in the Hispanic political community. Is the concern, is it real? Do you hear about this? Is this being discussed a lot? Do you think it really will affect, will it be a small number of people who maybe don't do it, or do you think it could be widespread? Because that is the community you hear the most concern about.
Yeah, no, it is, because it has been, thanks to the president, in the limelight the most in terms of attacks and all sorts of things. So no, we are talking about it in the Latino community, and it's interesting to note that it was the growth of the Hispanic community in the census in the last two censuses that gave us that edge to have that second congressional district. So it is in all Rhode Islanders' best interest to have every single person, including every single person in the Latino community, be counted as part of Census 2020. We are having those conversations. We're trying to figure out how to best get those messages across. And I'm prepared for like a real roll up your sleeves effort for Census 2020.
We have about a minute left. Conventional wisdom is it's when, not if, Rhode Island will legalize pot. Do you support or oppose the legalization of recreational marijuana?
So at this point, I think I will say that I support the legalization. I think that there is a move across our country that would make it hard for us to not have it legalized here. Having said that, Colorado just announced $1 billion in tax revenue. I would want to make sure that any taxes are very much directed, not necessarily at a general fund, but really are targeted so that we can deal with addiction. I think the one good thing about where we are now with regards to addiction and drugs is that there's a lot more consciousness raising, that this is, addiction is not necessarily a crime, it's something that people are subject to, and so we need to have services available for people who do end up getting addicted to get out of that addiction.
All right, Rhode Island Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea, thank you so much for joining us on the program. If you missed any of it, it is online, WPRI.com. Do not forget to subscribe to our podcast. You can find it through iTunes. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.